Hello, my name is Jonathan Manus, and I'm currently enrolled in the Organizational Leadership Program with Texas A&M University Commerce. For the past 14 years, I have been employed by the City of Allen Police Department, where I'm currently employed as a patrol shift sergeant in the Patrol Services Division. When starting this program, I really had kind of a small, slight foundation about leadership and what I wanted to be as a leader, and all that came from my previous experiences. After I graduated high school, I took a job with a relative in the ceramic tile industry, and I quickly learned what I didn't want to be as a supervisor, a leader, a manager. The owner of the business really was hands off, and there wasn't a lot of accountability for him. So he wasn't around much, which kind of gave the power to the tile setters. I was a helper, of course, starting out. So I quickly learned how I didn't want to be a boss at that time, what was referred to as a boss or a manager. Um, People in that industry were quick to tell you what to do without any appreciation. Do it because I said to do it. Run and do it as fast as you can. And I really didn't like that. And I realized that you would get a lot more out of people with appreciation rather than expectation. Um, After I left the tile industry and got into other endeavors, eventually into law enforcement, I kept that with me as far as what I didn't want to be as a supervisor. And when I became a supervisor in law enforcement, I realized that what I was taking bits and pieces of people that have supervised me in law enforcement, taking the things that I liked that and worked well, and tried to make them mine, with still holding on to the values of not wanting to tell people what to do or be a boss, and to expect a lot of things out of people without any appreciation. And I really didn't have a name or a title for it when I did that. So I I just did what other people did and tried to mold myself after them. And coming into this, I've been to a couple of supervisor schools. They touch briefly on a lot of the topics that I've learned throughout the course. And so I've been able to take what little bit that I've learned, which was a very minute bit, as I got into this course of study, and realized that there was a lot more to it. I went to a 3-day supervisor school when I promoted to corporal, and I went to the School of Police Supervision at ILEA in Plano, Texas for a month. And again, they touched on a lot of these topics separately, but didn't really tie them all together. So when I started this degree program, I started it with a few goals in mind. One was to obtain a degree, and so I could promote and get further in my career. The second one is to set an example for my kids. I have 4 children, 2 girls and 2 boys. And the third was to make my mother proud. And but as I've gone through this, I've really seen how this program relates to what I do every day. And jumping into it, I immediately started using concepts that I was learning. In issues in organizational leadership, the first class that I took, I was able to start putting a name to the theories that I'd already learned through the supervisor schools, and started to see some of the things that I wanted to implement as far as a supervisor. I quickly learned the difference between a manager and a leader, and I had never separated the two before, and now I'm able to do that. I see that I want to be a leader and manage when it's necessary, and there are times in law enforcement when you have to manage such as critical incidents. Um, I began to learn about conflict and the role it plays within an organization, and conflict in a police department, believe it or not, is pretty high. I tried to help alleviate some of that by letting the people know that I supervise, that I'm working with them, and they don't work for me. And so I went in, and instead of in briefings, for example, I would go in, and they usually have one spot where the supervisor sits and does the briefing. So I decided to take it a little different approach and started moving my seat around in between with the officers. And so we become a team and feel more like a team. Um, I quickly learned about setting goals, and we can set goals at a shift level. And that's something we had never done. So I put the ball in their court, so to speak, let them be the major part of setting goals. And we set a goal as a shift and work toward those. We're together for at least 6 months. Let's work on something small for the bigger picture and the vision of the police department. Um, so I was able to put names and theories with what I learned already and realized the direction that I wanted to start going. In the data-driven decision-making classes, I really started to learn the importance of data. We don't deal with that a lot hands-on personally as patrol sergeants, but the use of it and where it can be used to on our day-to-day duties as a shift sergeant became evident to me. I learned how to identify data and the importance of that data. And then moving forward, and once I'm gathering the data and seeing how to use it to make decisions and to solve issues. Currently, after taking the class, I was able to take the data that using the key performance indicators and put them toward different metrics. And so I took that and I was able to learn how to put it even into an Excel spreadsheet. I didn't know a lot about Excel when I came into those classes. So I was able to take that data and put it into an Excel spreadsheet, learn to make graphs from it, learn to make it work for me. And since that class, I have learned how to take it and use it to, one, I've solved a conflict with it. There was a conflict among 3 officers about activity and who did more work, and I was able to break it down and put the data into an Excel spreadsheet and show the difference. And they were all doing about the same amount of work, and it really solved an issue there. Using the data to make decisions, kind of a decision making two, data-driven decision making two, was taking that data and making strategic decisions, I guess you would say. In this case, I have an example to use. We've been given data about one of the sectors of our city, a crime in that part of the city. And we are taking that data and we are looking for innovative solutions to the problems that we see there. We're seeing trends using the data and what crimes are exceptionally high in that sector of the city. And so now we're coming together and we're working as a group to figure out some innovative solutions to those problems based upon the data that we were given. In my behavior, ethics, and leadership classes, the first and foremost, the big thing was the definition of ethics. How do you define ethics? And it really made sense to me as far as the difference between it and other definitions that were used. So once I learned ethics and the definition of ethics and what it is and what it isn't, I learned that really the framework for ethical decision making. And that's huge in law enforcement. Ethics and integrity go hand in hand. And they're huge in law enforcement because if you lose those, you can no longer be effective in our profession. So under the framework for ethical decision making, I learned how to recognize the ethical issues. And from those, you get the facts to make the decision. You evaluate your alternatives, and you make a decision, you test it, and then you reflect on the outcome. And that's something that I've tried to take and put into my daily duties as a sergeant when it comes to making decisions, whether it be what we're going to do for the day or if it comes into a disciplinary issue. I also learned about motivation. Currently, I'm faced with several different generations of officers, and the big one that I was dealt with recently was the millennials. And so I had to figure out what motivates them, and along with that, I had to figure out how to motivate them, and it's been a big eye opener. And from that, I was able to identify the sources of power I was going to use while on my shift. And in law enforcement, as you can imagine, there are a lot of people that promote to get to positional power. They want the rank. They want to be able to say that I have these stripes. You have to listen to me because I have this rank. And that's never been me. And I realized really quickly that the power that I wanted to rely on and I wanted that really motivates people is using referent power and expert power. And by doing that and by stressing that and exemplifying that, I have seen a whole new change in the people that work for me. Um, Moving on into my leadership theory class, this is where I really started tying things together. Doing a SWOT analysis is something that I've never done, and doing this, learn how to do a SWOT analysis. Identify the strengths and weaknesses of the organization, the opportunities and threats. And within law enforcement, a lot of our forces come from external forces, whether it be legal or political changes. So um, and also learn the three types of planning, whether it's strategic, whether it's tactical or operational. And started learning about the forces and motivation in that. And then moving on to data-driven decision making too, started learning about the major phases of a project life cycle, and really putting that together into a process change. And of course, the culminating projects for those with the SWOT analysis and the process change, and how to walk through the phases of that change. Moving from that into the leading change, actually, that was a big one for me by learning how to manage the change, especially with the culminating project. Um, Change is something that's typically thrust upon us in law enforcement, and there's not much preparation for it. So, being able to take what I learned on managing change, identifying the people that it's going to affect, how do we communicate the change to people? How do we identify resistance to the change and overcome the resistance to the change? Were huge for us in law enforcement, and being able to manage change is typically thrust upon us in our profession. So that's huge, and that's something that I really can't use right now a whole lot, but I can use very much so moving forward as I promote and become more of an upper level management leader. Um, from there, I moved into what I'm currently taking now, the Capstone 1 and Capstone 2, and kind of putting everything I've learned together. The project, the strategic business analysis for the Capstone 1 class was very challenging, but I enjoyed it. It gave me a second to reflect on everything that I've learned, pull it in, and using the SWOT analysis and environmental scanning and things of that nature, identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and help the people make a plan for their business. And of course, now I'm in Capstone 2 and kind of winding down my journey in the organizational leadership degree path. And it gives me a chance to reflect on where I am as a leader now. I feel I'm more prepared. I feel that I have a direction to go. I know how to motivate people better. I know how to get them involved better. I know how to get them on board and try to motivate them and get them to see a vision that we want to take our unit first off, which aligns with the vision of the organization. And so I've really learned a lot in this. And as a supervisor moving forward, I realized that right now I can't make a lot of changes to the department because they're generally dictated for us. But what I can do is change the culture. With the new generations coming in, the old culture just won't work sometimes. And we have to be willing to change the culture of our department and be progressive in that. And that's where I'm coming into play, taking what I've learned from this course, going back and along with the little changes that I've made so far, adding in different changes to it and putting them all together and change the culture of my organization now. That's where I can do moving forward. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your help throughout this process and your guidance. Thank you for everything that I've learned. I can't wait to put it all into action as I move through my career. And thank you.